The voyage started with the thought that how am I going to fill this big space at the museum? And one of the things which was concerning me was that we were moving out into the country, and so I wasn't going to be able to sort of have a concentrated time for painting, and so at this point I thought, well, perhaps a drawing show. And then I was looking through some drawings I did in sort of 2003, 2004, drawings and which turned into a print as well, called The Voyage. And there was 3 of them, and I suddenly thought, this looks like a sort of start of a sequence, which I didn't really sort of think of it before. The man sort of sitting in a hold of a boat seemed to sort of suggest an idea of remembering either a voyage or planning a voyage, going somewhere. And suddenly I thought, well, this could be perhaps turn into a longer sequence. When I'm painting, I sort of work on about 12 to 16 paintings over a year, and I do a little bit of each day. They sort of slowly accumulate and sort of help each other to finish. And I thought I couldn't really work on the drawings like this. They had to be done much more sort of systematically. So I decided to start every Monday 2 drawings, and work till the end of the week. And there'll be 2 days of teaching in between that as well, and just to let the unconscious in a way kind of guide me and see what happens. It was just a sort of a kind of voyage into the unknown, to sort of plunge into it. I started the sequence in September 2010 and finished in sort of May, sort of 9 months later. It's remarkable how the unconscious has sort of, in a sense, formulated a sequence which and gone into areas which I just never envisaged. Initially, they started off with familiar images in the sense of things I'd done in previous paintings, but gradually new sort of areas opened up, and new objects, props arrived in this space. The main thing was to sort of have a space which is kind of coherent throughout the series, and then just to, in a sense, within the space, let the props sort of, in a sense, be the actors and see where they went, and all sorts of things came, which it was a complete surprise. Yeah. Yes, he came in just before Christmas. Yes, I mean, I have painted herons, but suddenly, because I use rag paper, Indian rag paper, handmade paper, there's all sorts of imperfections and bits and pieces in it. Some of the sort of creases suggested a sort of beak, and sort of the man then started sort of looking more and more like a heron, and that gave me the idea of continuing with him. Mm-hmm. And he became like, as somebody else has mentioned, became like a kind of Ubu figure where suddenly I could do all sorts of things with. He was sort of a bit silly, ridiculous, a bit menacing. But it allowed me to go into areas in the drawings which I'd never really sort of touched on before. There's some dark scenes, there's some, yes, violent scenes, sexual scenes, and things which have always been sort of on the edge of in my work, but I think I've sort of plunged into it much more directly in this series. Yeah, I think they've gone back to my very earliest work, which is the Tower of Copernicus series, in the sort of, which started really after I left the Royal College in 1980, and the sense that this was a sort of place of memory, of thinking. I mean, in one sense, the things that happen inside it are sort of personal, and it doesn't really matter that people understand what each individual image means. But what I want to get over is a sense of the structuring of a kind of dreaming, of thinking, and the enclosure seems to be to sort of provide me with that way of containing it. Yeah. In sort of prints, I have actually worked in sort of small sequences. This is the first time I've really wanted to sort of take it much further. And I see them as working left to right or right to left, whichever way you want to look at them, but as well have sort of vertical sequence to I've got sort of lots of ladders in the drawings to evoke this sense that sort of plunging into one's sort of well of remembrance, that like a bucket throwing into the well, we pick up sort of air for a long time, and then one time it sort of plunges into something really, into the water and brings up something significant. And so that's why I think it's been interesting to work as a sequence, because I think it sort of has allowed me to sort of kind of drop the bucket deeper and deeper in a sense. I wanted to sort of have a colour which sort of went through the whole thing, which kind of unified it, the sequence, and I just happened to sort of use some the dregs of from my bottom of my jam jar, which all the other colours had been sort of cleaned out, and it was this lovely sort of warm kind of Baltic brown, amber brown, and plus other colours, but I wanted to be quite sparse and just to sort of bring out sort of little significant moments with the colour. I don't think I've finished the series, the sequence. I imagine that the drawings will continue, but at some point they will turn into paintings. And as usual with me, I sort of have I work on paintings for a couple of years, and then I do a series of prints, and those prints suggest paintings. So I expect that will carry on. I've called this sequence 60 drawings a still film. When I was a student, I made films. In fact, this was the reason I was chucked out of Falmouth, was I was supposed to be painting, and they couldn't evaluate the films. But I felt I couldn't paint the kind of images I wanted then, and so started making films. Sometimes very sort of simple ones, just going around a house and watching how the shadows kind of move, and trying to evoke a sort of presence of somebody living there, or perhaps had lived there. Peter Redgrove was the poet in residence at Falmouth, and he was the one who basically introduced me to. I mean, he'd been psychoanalyzed by someone who was worked with Jung, and he was someone who sort of believed completely that we are basically unconscious beings. That a lot of what we do is very unconscious, and we should enjoy that. I mean, that's part of one's way of being, in a way. And so he used a lot of techniques, a lot of games to kind of help us to tap into that, which then I took into the films with his help. As at Royal College, one of the tutors introduced me to Tarkovsky, and I felt suddenly he was someone who gave me confidence to think in these iconic kind of dream images, these sort of significant images which seem to sort of sum up a certain part of your life. The images have like a kind of gravity which sort of brings together all sorts of feelings and emotions from a particular period. Well, when I want to start work, sometimes I would read poetry to switch into another frame of thinking, into another frame of imagining the world in a way. Because we usually, we're very practical. We have to, get the car MOT'd and go and do the shopping and stuff. For me, poetry actually sort of switches on a different kind of mind, which makes all sorts of connections, past and present, which are very odd and surprising. My parents were Polish, and they came just after the war from Italy, where they both worked in the Red Cross. In fact, they had a choice whether to go to New York or to Liverpool, and so I could have been in New York, but in fact, so ended up in Liverpool. They came in 46, and I was born in 47. And then for the next 11 years, we lived in a sort of refugee camp. It wasn't Poland, but it wasn't England either. It was a kind of in between. There was obviously Polish rituals and the church and school and so forth, but there was a constant referring back to going back to Poland, and which for various reasons we never did. Every time when we moved to London, we had to report to the police station. I remember my parents didn't speak English, so I would go with them to the police station, and we would register as aliens. For me, the significant things in my childhood was my father's collection of Hungarian stamps. He has spent the war years in Hungary in a camp, but it was because the Hungarians, like the Poles, they actually let them sort of go out of the camp and do various things. And he started collecting stamps, and he had 5 volumes by the time he left. He was there for about 4 years, and he carried these across the Alps to Italy, to Monte Cassino, where he's met my mother, and then managed to get them over to England. And I just remember sitting there with him, looking at these collections of stamps and the series of about animals or about birds or mountains, whatever. And it was the miniaturization of the world, the transmogrifying of the world into an image, which I think has stayed with me. I think that's what I've sort of continued in a way with my work, which is to sort of take the world and sort of what I call cook it and change it into an image. But it's a way of thinking about the world. It's a way of being able to contain it, being able to, in a sense, to hold it. It's a portable way of having the world, in a sense. You can carry it around, which is perhaps as a refugee, you sort of, I'm drawn to that sense that I could, pack it away in a suitcase and go off with it.